started. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are nearing the end of classes. Way to go, folks in my lab who had their pig practical yesterday. That went really well. I haven't talked to Cindy yet, but she said that people had, and lots of people came on Monday for the open lab practice, so good job for that. For those who have your pig practical this afternoon, you're going to do great. What do you think? People that had it, did it go better than you thought? Was it okay?
Yeah, it went fine.
It went fine.
It's pretty fun. It's like a comedy show.
A comedy show. Well, maybe that was your, like the comedy show. And then I had people requesting a buzzer sound if they were incorrect. I'm looking at you. Yeah. That was your partner, right. So we just sort out which partner wanted the buzzing sound kind of a thing. But
Actually got one.
What's that?
You actually got
No,
one.
I made it. I just made it. No, I didn't have like a buzz. No, I was not. I was ill prepared for that. I have a Staples, easy button or whatever else, but I don't have a, yeah, so I just made a sound. I even just did it just to make the sound, and then it's like, oh no, I felt horrible. That's not in my personality to make like grumpy sounds on something. Anyhow, so we have a week from today is your last regular lecture exam. So that's a little weird because usually we like see each other on Wednesday and you have an exam on Friday. So we have our exam next Wednesday when we see each other. I expect between today and Friday, we might get through like all of this stuff, and the hybrid lecture might be me going over things or questions or things like that. So that means it's your job to send me questions or things that you want to go over before your exam, okay? Because it's a little weird. It's not how we normally do things, okay? And I will try to remind you before then. I did want to go over the quiz from last week because there were a couple of questions that a lot of people missed. So I want to make sure that we're squared away on that too. And to remind you too, we do still have lab next week. Okay, so you're going to see myself or Cindy next week for lab, but we are doing our Daphne lab. So it's like a scientific method lab. Did Cindy talk with you guys for her lab group about that at all? Okay. I only tell mine that we're doing a lab. So we're going to do a scientific method lab. Basically, you and your lab partner are going to try to test the heart rate for these little water fleas. And they're see-through little things, and then you can watch their hearts beat. And we will have a variety of solutions that you can kind of put these little fleas in to see what happens with their heart rate. And I want you to come up with your hypothesis about what's going to happen before you start the experiment. Now, Daphnia, they're like little arthropods. Again, they're like little like water fleas. Their hearts may work the same as ours, or it might be different. So I would just want you to take a guess as to what's going to happen. And the solutions usually that we have are like a caffeine solution, an alcohol solution, and then something else too. And sometimes people do a combo, caffeine and alcohol, to see what's going on for the heart rate for their little water fleas. So kind of, there's no quiz after that. It's pretty casual, but we just want you to have run an experiment, okay? This is on my little cheat sheet stuff here for myself for today. So today, real quick, before we get going on our circulatory system information, I want to review a bit about the digestive system stuff that was on this lecture quiz. Your quiz for this week is going to be on respiratory system, and I'd already had it written, I might throw in some circulatory system stuff from today so that we can have like a little practice with that too. So let's chat about this here. In humans, this is one of the ones that was missed. In humans, the majority of chemical digestion takes place where? So let's talk about each one of these choices and then sort out which one we think was the correct one. So oral cavity, in your mouth. Majority of chemical digestion? No. Is there any chemical digestion? Yes. What are we starting to break down in the oral cavity? Starches. Using what? What's that? Saliva. Also, specifically the salivary amylase of saliva. Yes. And why I'm doing this, and my little suggestion to you is to when you go through the quizzes should be still open for you to look at. I want you to go through each question and be like, oh, okay, well, why not? But what does happen there, kind of thing. You can use it a little bit of a study tool, okay? What about the stomach? Really, your stomach's not down here. It's more like up in here. Okay, stomach. Is that where the majority of digestion occurs? No. But is there digestion that occurs there? Yes. What gets broken down in the stomach? Acidic things. We have acidic things in the stomach. So there's hydrochloric acid in the stomach. We also have something that starts with a P. Pepsin. Or it's weird. It's pepsinogen. And then when you mix that with hydrochloric acid, it becomes pepsin. It denatures into being functional. It's kind of a weird thing. What is a pepsin breakdown? Protein, right? Remember we talked about peptide bonds a long time ago, polypeptides. I told you some of this stuff from the very beginning of the semester. I was going to circle on back around. Okay, so we're breaking down proteins, and we have some hydrochloric acid. What about the duodenum? Is that where the majority happens? No. That's the first part of the small intestine. What's the duodenum famous for? What's happening in the duodenum? We're adding a bunch of stuff. That's where all the stuff gets added in. So this is where it's a little confusing sometimes because that's where we're adding all of these things that are going to do the digesting. So we're adding a ton of bile salts from the liver and gallbladder. We're adding in tons and tons of digestive enzymes from the pancreas. The pancreas has digestive enzymes that will digest everything. Okay? So proteins, fats, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, and we even add in a little bit of bicarbonate. Sounds weird. Bicarbonate is basically to neutralize all that acid that just got put in from the stomach, because you're not going to feel real good if all that acid makes its way the rest of the way down your digestive system. Okay, so duodenum is where we add in all of that digestive juice, but the majority of digestion is happening in the jejunum. Or if you have lab with me, I would say jejunum, like somewhere here in the middle. Okay, jejunum. That's where, and it's doing all these twists and turns and spending tons of time there. The jejunum is where we do the most digesting. That's where it spends a lot of time there. It just had all those digestive juices added to it in the duodenum, and so the jejunum, that's where it's getting broken down, little bits to the monomers. What's happening in the ileum? That's not even on here, but what's happening in the ileum? That, I guess, will be a different question. Here, let's just carry on. We'll wait for a second for that one. What's going on in the colon? Well, there's processing stuff a little bit. The majority, or the colon or the large intestine, that's basically where your body is slurping back all the water that it added in all of those juices along for digestion. So your large intestine or the colon, that's where your body, and there is digesting happening, but it's not done by you. It's done by the bacteria that are hanging out in your colon, okay? It is beneficial to you, but there's a lot of the bacteria that are doing things there. So majority of what's happening, from what we've been talking about for Bio 100, is that your body is reabsorbing water. It's taking back that water that it added in along the way. All right, how are we doing? Good? Okay. All right, so question 2, mechanical digestion occurs in which of the following areas? So mechanical digestion was like the equivalent of like me tearing up that paper. We still have the same thing. It's just in smaller pieces. So do we have mechanical digestion happening in the colon? No, that's just where we're getting our water back. Small intestine? No, we're not tearing things up there. Oral cavity? Yes. That's where we're chewing things up. What's the fancy word for chewing? Mastication. Okay. All right, question 3. The bulk, oh no, my quiz is gonna be submitted in a minute. Is that stressful when it pops up like that? Sorry, not sorry. Okay, like I want you to have a little bit of that, like, I gotta get it done. Okay, bulk of digestive enzymes are produced in the pancreas. True or false? Yes. True. Okay, and then human digestive system is so efficient, no nutrition is lost to feces. False. No, none of those systems are totally efficient. That's actually kind of a good thing because it helps to move things along too. That's like a lot of the insoluble fibers and stuff like that. That's like to help things move along in your gut. Okay, now where would you expect to find the villi in humans? The ileum. The villi are those little projections that stick out, and then they even have little projections on them, microvilli, in the ileum. Cecum? No, we don't have much of one. Nasal passages? No. Okay, stomach? Nope. All right, the gallbladder, this is one that a lot of people missed. The gallbladder produces bile and delivers it to the duodenum. True or false? True. I'm gonna go with true. Part of it's true, but not all of it. What makes the bile? The liver. So this is a bugger of a question. This is because the gallbladder produces bile. No, it does deliver it to the duodenum, but it does not make it. Remember, the gallbladder is like a little side pocket or pouch. We'd like to talk about that for a lab. It looks like a little deflated balloon, a little balloon that's not been blown up yet, that's tucked in under the liver. And that's where if the liver makes a bunch of bile, it kind of backs up into the gallbladder and it's ready to add it in. But the gallbladder does not make bile. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this one because that was just like an slow down kind of a question. Okay, when I'm I'm still a student, I still take classes for other things. Okay, lately I've been like on a big sustainability and forestry kick. So I have to make myself slow down and read everything and like circle stuff, underline things. You can always write all over on my tests. Okay, all right. Ooh, which of the following is the first nutrient to start being digested in the human digestive system? Starch, which is also a carbohydrate. So I could have had carbohydrate there. Starch is just a specific type of a carbohydrate. Okay, what's the name for the wave-like contractions of muscles forcing the food down the digestive tract? Peristalsis. So churning only happens in the stomach, but peristalsis happens like everywhere. It's like down your esophagus, even a little in the stomach, all along through the small intestine. It's like squishing behind it, pushing it along. Ulcers? No. Ouch. No, thank you. Okay, how about number 9? Which of the following is the correct order for the pathway of food? I promise I will ask you pathway questions. We've talked about that a bit. It does matter the order in which things occur. So, and by the way, I always like point at where these things are in my body. During the exam, if you need to point where things are, it's all good. It makes me happy actually. All right, so it's okay. So oral cavity, ileum, no, that's like skip it to the end. Esophagus, stomach, jejunum, duodenum, no, because the jejunum and the duodenum are mixed. How about stomach, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, colon? Yes. But let's just check the other one to make sure. Oral cavity, stomach, duodenum, esophagus, no. Okay? It's like head, shoulders, knees, and toes. All right. Now, super important, already been slightly addressed in the other questions. Which portion, of the human digestive system is responsible for the absorption of the monomers? Ileum. Because that's the last part of the small intestine, and that's the part that has the villi to make more surface area. So that's the part that we really need to have, like, absorbing all that stuff. doing okay on this. People did well on this, but there were a couple of questions that like lots and lots of people missed. So I wanted to make sure to address those. And also to show you how you can check out your quizzes again and kind of go through them and think about, oh no, what happens here? Oh, what happens here? Kind of a thing. Study tools. Okay. So let's get going on our stuff. Circulation. So I know I barely started on this in terms of like the hybrid lecture. We're all good. Just a little appreciation for humans. We've got the fancy schmancy circulatory system. We have the 4 chambers for our heart. There are exceptions. As I tell my zoology students, there are exceptions to all of this. There are fish that actually have 4-chambered hearts. Sarcopterygians. They are like ancient, strange, weird things. And they also are like lungfish. Have you guys ever heard of lungfish before? Okay. They're really cool. They live in areas where it dries out. And so if this fish is in like this pond or this lake or whatever, and then it totally dries out and bakes, and there's certain regions like in the continent of Africa where this happens a fair amount, then they can slow down, they coat themselves in slime, and they can slow down their metabolism and hang out for 4 years until it rains again. And it's called estivation. It's the opposite of hibernation. If I have a chance today, I have a video on it. Maybe I'll link it in our stuff if you want later on. There's just weird things. So, and they can partially do this because they shut down some of their pathways for their heart. Pretty amazing stuff. All right. So the basic functions of the circulatory system, I did address these in the hybrid lecture, but just want to make sure we've got this squared away. So gas exchange, that's the carbon dioxide and oxygen, taking the oxygen in, getting rid of carbon dioxide. Did I mention what controls that yet? We'll get to that later on. My brain people, it's the medulla oblongata, which I say in Adam Sandler voice in my head. Okay, from Waterboy, medulla oblongata. If you don't know that, that's okay. That's my movie reference. All right. So it's part of your brain that controls that. So we'll talk about that later on. The circulatory system delivers the nutrients, so it takes those blood sugars around, takes hormones around, all sorts of different things. We also have the collecting the metabolic wastes. So that's like carbon dioxide. I'll write some of this stuff. Whoops, I got too far. I clicked something. Urea. So there's the nitrogen products that are made in different parts of your body, kind of a thing. The circulatory system helps aid in the regulation of body temperature. Did I talk about this part in my hybrid lecture? Body temperature? Okay, I think so. So basically it's like when you're super cold, your body doesn't keeps more of the blood in toward the core, not to your fingertips, things like that. Or when you're hot, like I was just on the other side of campus at Emory is setting up for some party thing tomorrow, and I'm all sweaty because I was hot. So, and my perpetual color is pink anyway. So I'm always kind of pink because my body's trying to cool down. Combat disease agents. That's like when the white blood cells are cruising around, kind of like a Pac-Man sort of thing. We'll talk about white blood cells in a little bit. There are lots of different kinds of white blood cells. If you've taken any anatomy and physiology or human biology, you'll know there's multiple different types. And then, yes, distributing hormones too. Hormones, my friends, are basically just chemical signals to do different things in your body. And we all have a lot of different types of hormones in our body. In terms of sex hormones and things like that, like testosterone, estrogen, everybody has those just in different varying amounts. So those are signals in the body. So in terms of internal transport systems, there are some things that have no true circulatory system. This is not us. Just so you know, our focus is going to be on humans, but I just want you to, this is my zoology spiel. I do want you to kind of know that there are some organisms, some living things that don't have a circulatory system. So how do they get stuff? Like if our circulatory system, and why I'm bringing this up is because this is really important in terms of organisms being more complex, is that they have this whole transport system. Even our friends the plants had transport systems for getting the hormones around and the nutrition and whatever else. So this right here is a sponge. Have I shown you guys a picture? Well, we did the sponge for the digestive system. It's mostly a whole bunch of holes, right? So, and then this is a jellyfish. I do love a jellyfish, but they also don't have a whole circulatory system. So basically, they have to use a lot of diffusion to bring things in, and even maybe some endocytosis, exocytosis stuff. But what happens is they are limited in size and complexity. Limited in size and complexity because they don't have the system in their body to deliver all of this nutrition or to deliver the oxygen or whatever else. Jellyfish, how fast do they move? Depends. What's that? Depends on the jellyfish. But generally speaking, they're not going really speedy kind of a thing, not like a cheetah or something like that. And even in the wild world of simple organisms, a jellyfish is actually pretty complicated compared to some of them. So a sponge doesn't move at all. It's there. They can get big, but they're filled with tons and tons of holes, and they're not very complex. So we do have some things that have another step in a circulatory system before we get to ours, and these are things that have an open circulatory system. These are things like arthropods is my main example. Even things like some, and it's different depending upon the phylum, but even like clams, like some types of mollusks. Not all of them are like that though, because some do have a closed circulatory system. But arthropods, things like crabs, crayfish, bees, spiders, tarantulas, things like that, they have this open circulatory system. And what happens is that they usually have hearts, plural. Sometimes these will be listed as hearts, and sometimes they will be called aortic arches. Where for our pig, where was the aortic arch? Like behind the heart, right? Because that's where then we have the branches going up off to that, like the brachiocephalic artery and the left subclavian artery. So aortic, sometimes these are called, if it's an open circulatory system, sometimes it'll be called a heart, or sometimes it'll be called hearts, plural, or even aortic arches. They don't even actually have a whole heart, and it's basically just that arch squeezing. Interesting thing to think about, we'll get to this in a little bit. Arteries, which take the blood away from the heart, have muscle around them. They are actually contracting a bit too to help move it along. So, interesting thing for these guys, the blood is pumped through these open-ended vessels. There's like holes in the heart and flows out among the cells. They do not have any interstitial fluid, which is kind of a weirder thing to think about. Basically what happens is these hearts squeeze. It's actually very much like a sponge. If I had a sponge up here that was soaked in water, okay, if I squeeze that, I could just have a whole bunch of that liquid or water come out. And then if I put that sponge back in that water and just let it be, it'll suction that water kind of back up again. That's how their hearts work. They squeeze all this fluid over everything, and then basically as they relax, they kind of suction it back up into the heart. Kind of a strange sort of a system. Interstitial fluid. I don't know that we've talked about this. Interstitial fluid will be important like in terms of your lymphatic system and stuff like that. This is like, interstitial fluid is like fluid between your cells. Have you ever gotten a road rash? Or like skin your knee, something like that? And then if you kind of dab on your, like gym, like wipe out on the gym floor, this is gross. The fluid is like, you might have some blood, but then it's also like a clear yellow fluid to it. Yeah. And that's the interstitial fluid. Our skin is basically waterproof, but inside of our body, we have a lot of little bits of water, like in between our cells, because it helps to make diffusion happen faster, moving the oxygen in and out, or the carbon dioxide, or even some of those nutrients. So for these guys with an open circulatory system, they don't have that interstitial fluid because everything gets soaked inside of their body with like this. It's usually called hemolymph. So I'll do this here in a moment. And so their components for their circulation is they have heart to arteries. So they do have some blood vessels. And then they have this thing called a hemocoel, and then back to the heart, plus like this circulating fluid. All along, it's like this hemolymph kind of a thing. And a hemocoel is just a cavity or a space where the blood flows. So it kind of makes its way along, it flows over certain things, and then gets kind of sucked up back into the hearts, and then squeezed again all around. This is different than our body. In our bodies, the blood is always in a tube, unless you have a cut. Your blood is in a tube or the heart. So we're going to talk about some characteristics of this open circulatory system. It works well for some things. By the way, you might have noticed this before, not all living things have red blood. Okay? It depends. We happen to have red blood because we have a lot of hemoglobin in our blood that has iron in it. So you might know if you are low on iron, you might be low in energy kind of thing because your body's not making enough hemoglobin. But not all things have that. There are some things, horseshoe crabs. Has anybody ever seen a horseshoe crab before? They're kind of weird. It's like this, I don't know, dome-like structure with this big long kelson, like a tail sticking out of it. And they've got these crabby legs underneath. They're prehistoric, but they're still alive now. They have copper in their blood, and they have like blue-green blood. And it's really weird. In my zoology class, I have a picture of one of my lectures. People used to farm horseshoe crabs to get their blood because their blood would change color as an indicator if it was in contact with bacteria. So they would use horseshoe crab blood to test IV medications. Anything that like would be a medicine or something that would be given intravenously, they would check to see if there was any bacteria in that medication before they give it to people with horseshoe crab blood. Totally weird because it would change color. It's different stuff. That was my random side note for you. Okay, I won't ask you about that on your test. Don't you worry. Okay, so in terms of an open circulatory system, and that's like what we have for grasshoppers or locusts or things like that, they are, generally speaking, low pressure. Low pressure. Because it's just kind of washing this stuff over everything and then suctioning it back up into the heart. So because it's low pressure, that's limited in its efficiency. And for this, the organs are bathed in blood liquid, whatever that color might be. So they're, in terms of like If a pig had an open circulatory system, it wouldn't have all of those blood vessels. It would have a few, and then basically it would just be all covered in all blood all around on the inside. Okay, so it works. It's more efficient than having no circulatory system, but it's not super efficient because the blood is not enclosed all of the time. So in terms of wanting to get blood to a certain place quickly, this is not the way to go. It's better if it's actually in a tube or like some kind of a hose type of a structure. All right, so that's open circulatory system. So now we're going to talk about a closed circulatory system. Basically, this is what we have, and this is how things work in your body. Somebody had asked me last semester, well, what about when they like to watch the surgery channel or like surgeries on YouTube. They're like, there's blood in there. It's like, well, because a little blood vessel has been cut. Like when you see blood in certain things for like a surgery or whatever else, it's because little tiny tubes have been cut, those capillaries. So the blood, for key idea for this, closed circulatory system, and by the way, this is not just humans, okay, so other things have this too, but the blood is always in a heart or a blood vessel, basically a tube. And this is how it gets really far from one spot to another. Like, I was talking about this with one of my other classes. Like if you have a hose, all right, I was thinking about like farm or barn chores. So if I'm trying to go water some animals and I have my hose and I turn it on and then I get to the tank and I'm trying to fill it up and there's like nothing coming out, what's problematic? What probably happened? A kink in the hose or holes in the hose. Somebody drove over it or the dog chewed up or something like, like something like that. So there's holes. They're not very efficient. But if you want to get it to where it needs to be, then you have to have that enclosed tube kind of a space. So let's talk about the tubes for this here. Some of the major ones are arteries. Arteries are any blood vessel that carry blood away from the heart. And I remember this because there's an A for artery and an A in away, like A for the start of the word away. Okay. And there's like, they even have smooth muscle. Your arteries actually contract. The heart contracts, the ventricles contract, and then even the arteries contract too. One thing to note, these are not always high in oxygen for the arteries. Sometimes people think, oh, an artery is going to be the one that has high in oxygen. Not always. We're going to talk about the pathway through for the circulatory system, but there is an artery, the pulmonary artery. Can you picture the pig's pulmonary artery? You know where that is? Okay. So say if you pull on the heart, you might see the pulmonary artery in between the two atria. That artery is taking blood from the heart to the lungs to go get oxygenated. So usually there's this idea that arteries have high oxygen blood, not always. Then we have our veins. Veins are any blood vessel that are carrying blood to the heart. And this is an interesting thing because the veins don't have muscle or don't have very much muscle to them. Anybody know from any like health class or human anatomy class how the blood makes its way back to the heart in the veins? It's not so much the contraction of the heart because let's think about it, your fingertips or your toes. It had to leave, there was an artery, and then it gets to smaller things. We'll talk about this, arterioles, and then the dead end is like a capillary, and then it makes its way back. It's losing a lot of pressure. How the blood makes its way back in the veins is by breathing. When you breathe and you drop, your diaphragm contracts and your thoracic cavity expands and your lungs expand, it squeezes a lot of your blood. It pushes a lot of your blood and moves it around. Also, what helps your blood move is using your skeletal muscles, walking, moving around. This is how, when people would get like varicose veins, it's basically a bulge in the vein. There are valves and veins that try to keep the blood moving in one direction. But like if you have a job or something where you stand in one position for a long time and are not able to move around very much, then your body can have a harder time pushing that blood back up to your heart. And so people can end up with like a bulge in their vein. Also, veins don't have a lot of muscle around them, so they're not really protected against the weight of that blood kind of pushing on them too. So we'll talk about this a little bit more, but it's kind of an interesting thing. So basically, these get the blood moves by breathing and skeletal muscles, or I'll say skeletal muscle movement. So literally, like when you're walking, your muscles are contracting and they're squeezing around the veins, and that's helping to push that back up. We also have, well, I'm going to get to the capillaries here in a minute. I want to show you real quick. I forgot to get this up. So I just pulled up a picture of like a search for slides of veins and arteries. Arteries are this nice, the round one, because there's all this layer of smooth muscle. Or down here, this is a nice one too. This like muscle all around it. Or even here, the arteries and veins. Arteries and veins usually run right next to each other, like east and west, I-90, okay? North and south, 95, all right? So they're running, the body is pretty efficient. They're usually running right next to each other. But those that are really rounded and have this nice round shape, those are the arteries because they have this layers of this muscle that are helping to maintain that shape. When you looked in your pig, they were injected with pink for the arteries and blue for the veins. It was usually easier to see the blue. The arteries would either look white or pink. They would look white because they're so thick with all of these layers of muscle and connective tissue before you actually got to the pink latex part. It was more the smaller blood vessels that you could see pink really well in them. But blue showed through much, much easier, even on the big things. The vena cava, you could see was pretty blue usually. And that's because the walls for a vein are very, very thin. So it is kind of an interesting thing to check out for this. So we also had, and then we'll get into like little smaller things too. There are smaller things, but we also have capillaries. And capillaries are like the dead end. It's like the end of the road where the direction changes. And these are the small vessels connecting the arteries and the veins. And I'm just writing that these are the dead ends. You know what I mean by a dead end, right? The end of a road where then you just have to turn back around. And so example would be like at the alveoli. It's moving away from the heart, picking up that oxygen, goes down to those teeny capillaries, and now it's going to make its way back to the heart, carrying that oxygen. All right. And I have like a little picture on here, and then we'll kind of go through. Okay. So, oh yeah, I realized I did add a picture in here. So lumen is just like the opening spot. So here's the lumen, the open area of a vein where the blood would flow. And then here's an artery. And you can see how thick the muscle is and the different layers to it. Blood clotting happens when parts of your blood, your platelets, come in contact with collagen, things that are on the outside of your blood vessels. And so basically it's like these two are not supposed to meet. So if they meet, then that means that there needs to start to be a clotting that's happening. So I like to draw this with a heart, which by the way does not look like a heart like that at all. So we're going away, this would be like the artery, away from the heart. And when they break down and get into smaller things, it becomes an arteriole. It's kind of a weird thing. The longer word is the smaller thing, oftentimes in science, because it has that little qualifier on it. And then we have the capillaries, and now it's making its way back to the heart. Venule, and then the vein, taking it back to the heart. All right, so characteristics of a closed circulatory system. High pressure, moving that stuff around pretty quickly, and it's generally very efficient. Okay, and this allows organisms to be large, fast moving, and have high metabolic rates because you're delivering all of that stuff really quickly. The organs are not bathed in blood. We have there's capillaries, like these little teeny tiny blood vessels. Like if you get a cut, your blood is not all loosened like that all the time. It's literally because you've cut some of those capillaries, cut some of those little blood vessels. Okay. So closed circulatory system. This is what we have in humans. And we will do like a little bit of a side quest here and talk about fish and some other things too, but then we're going to focus more for our stuff on humans. And if you think about the things that move the fastest, birds, when they can drop super fast, marlin, fish, tuna, things that can go really fast, they have these closed circulatory systems. A cheetah, all sorts of different things. All right. We'll show you some pictures for some different loops, and we'll see how far we get with this. Okay. All right. So always in a vessel, like a tube, or in the heart. Okay. So checking this out, this is a picture. I don't know how well you can see it. Fish, for their circulatory system, their blood goes to their heart, and then it goes to their gills on either side, and then straight from the gills, it goes around in the body and makes its way back to the heart. We just have those two loops there because you have like a right and a left for the fish. So it's going to the gills to get the oxygen, and then out to the body, and then back to the heart. Amphibians, things like frogs, salamanders, okay, they have lungs, some of them don't, and some of them will even do cutaneous respiration, breathe through their skin. There are some salamanders called plethodontid salamanders that don't have lungs at all. They just have a really, really long, skinny tail, have lots of surface area, and they breathe through their skin. But they're going to have a heart that's going to have a couple different chambers. They're going to have like two atria and then one ventricle, and it has this valve on the inside that flops back and forth depending upon which direction the heart is pumping things. Reptiles have almost 4 chambers of their heart, depends on the type. They'll have like a little connection in the middle. And then mammals, the birds, have the 4 chambers for the heart. So definitely a bit more specialized. We do want to talk about the circuits though. This is important. So for the fish, they have a single circuit circulatory system. It's enclosed, but it's a single circuit. Single circuit means it just does one loop. One loop. And don't worry about drawing all of this picture, but basically it leaves a heart, goes heart to the gills, to the body, to the heart. Heart to the gills, to the body, to the heart. And these are, by the way, we're going to talk about vertebrate cardiovascular systems. Vertebrates are things that have a spine, have a backbone, have a spine and like basically backbone. So this is cool, and it works well for fish, and some of the fish do this really, really, really well. But it's all, sometimes they can lose pressure because basically after it leaves the heart, then it squeezes along and kind of makes its way, goes to the gills and to the body, makes its way back to the heart. It can be kind of like lose pressure and not be quite as efficient as like what we have. And we have a double circuit circulatory system. So for mammals, and then also really for birds too, there is a double circuit circulatory system. And we have 2 basic circuits. There's the pulmonary circuit, which goes to the lungs. Pulmonary refers to your lungs. So it goes from the heart to the lungs to the heart. The systemic circuit then will take this out to the body. So it goes from a different section of the heart to the body to the heart. So here, I'll even like list on here. So we're going to go from the right ventricle out to the lungs, to the heart, and this is going to end up at the left atrium. Then it goes out from the left ventricle out to the body and arrives back at the right atrium. And I just did like RAs and RVs. We will talk about this pathway here next on Friday. Probably we will draw it. I don't know that we'll have time to do all of this. This pathway is really, really important. So going from the pulmonary circuit, it leaves the right ventricle. Do you remember on the pig, the atria just looked like little elephant ears. They were like little tiny little pouches. And then the ventricles were like the meaty, muscly part of the heart. That's basically how it works. The atria just kind of receive the blood, and it goes through a valve to the ventricles, and the ventricles are where it really squeezes and pushes. Those are the pumps of the heart. So this idea of the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit, this is what we have going on in our bodies and what your pig also had going on in its body. Okay, because we have this 4 chambers of the heart. There's the 2 sides of the heart and the 4 chambers to the heart. So on Friday, what we will do is we're going to draw something, a picture. So it's going to take up like a whole piece of paper, all right? So be ready, or if you're one of my computer peeps, then just make sure that you can draw something out like this pretty well. So we're going to draw our own stick figure version of this circuit, these double circuits, okay, on Friday. All right, looks like I'm out of time, and my zoology students have a test, so they'll be excited to get in here soon. All right, questions or concerns? Good luck to the folks who are having your pig practical this afternoon. You're going to do fantastic.